I'm gonna start it. I feel like I'm a guest.
Okay.
I missed like
All right.
2 in a row.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second Sundays. Dinah and I are excited to be here, but we wish we didn't have as much news as we actually do have. I want to start off with we definitely want to answer all your questions about the potential for a special session and specifically redistricting. But before we get into that, I just want to say that the government shutdown and federal cuts continue to impact services right here in Johnson County and across our state. And this week I attended the Commission on Aging breakfast, and the Johnson County AAA, they're responsible for the nutrition programs that serve our elderly population. And the real live minute impact is that our Meals on Wheels program, instead of delivering 30 meals a month, is now cut down to 8 meals a month. And we have a waiting list, unprecedented here in Johnson County. We've never had a waiting list before, of now 1,200 people in our community who are homebound, who are not able to even sign up for the Meals on Wheels program. We need to urge our Congress members to renew the Older Adults Act. That funding is integral to be able to help people age in place and retire with dignity. And folks are not. We still have some services available, like the communal sites, the CHAMPS program. But for people who are not able to get the transportation or to leave their homes, they're having dramatic reductions to basic needs. So this is really urgent matters before us. I don't know if you all saw today that on over the weekend, the Department of Education completely laid off and obliterated the special education component of the U.S. Department of Education that oversees IDEA, all of the funding and resources available to students with special needs. That's going to have a huge impact on our budget as well. So these are the things that are happening to us in real time. And now Kansas Republicans, our colleagues in the legislature, are being called on to help Donald Trump cheat in the next election. He's able to do what he's doing now with just 2 votes, but he wants more power. He wants more. And he is asking Kansas to be a part of that. And it makes me very, honestly, just frightened to think about what he will do if he does get those additional votes and has no fear of accountability or the fear of impeachment for how far he'll take his power. So we are very busy working on trying to stop the efforts for a special session, and namely a redistricting bill that would be before us should we have a special session. But even if we don't end up meeting in November again, a bill would still be in order in January. So I don't know how far and how long they would be willing to draw this out, but it is a real concern that we just redrew our maps in 2022, 3 years ago. We don't need to do it again until 2032, but here we are looking at the potential to draw a sitting member of Congress a tougher district 7 years early. And there are just so many more pressing issues to be focusing on right now than DC politics. And it really is disappointing because Kansas, I feel like, at least since I've been here, that we've risen above this many times. So it makes me very sad that we're playing the worst of the worst here in our own communities. And I think it would be, it would just be really amazing if there are enough Republicans who can come together and say, no, we can say no to this and survive it. So that's what we're working on, and I'll let Dinah weigh in.
What are the Meals on Wheels figures again?
So at the commission breakfast, they told us that they have gone from doing 30 meals a month down to 8 meals a month. And there are currently 6,000 people who use that service. Then there's 1,284 on the waiting list. So, and these people rely on this service.
What's the area that covers?
That's Johnson County. That's for all of Johnson County.
All of Johnson.
Yeah. So I talked with the director of the Human Services Department for Johnson County, and he's the president of the state association right now. So they're going to be surveying all the AAAs to see what the statewide impact on, because I know our Our funding for that is $2.3 million. So he's going to see, because we don't know statewide what the impact is. And Johnson County is the only area agency on aging that serves just one county. So they're going to try to get that together to give us that information.
Well, good afternoon. I am Senator Dinah Sykes. I think I know everyone, but I feel like I've been gone the last 2 months because of other obligations. So I feel like I'm a visitor, but I am very faithful to Joella for continuing these even in my absence. So yes, there is a lot going on. The biggest thing in the news is this redistricting, and where, again, Donald Trump and those in power are trying to use that power to gain more power so that they can cheat. And and I want to say thank you to the House. That I think the House is kind of where the potential for a backstop is, because all the House members are up for reelection next year, and there are representatives on the other side of the aisle that are in districts that overwhelmingly supported Sharice Davids, and I think that plays into that. And I also am very thankful, and Joella has done this with, as well as Leader Woodard, really making sure that constituents in those districts are reaching out to their House members, trying to say, this isn't fair. Again, powerful, trying to yield more powerful in order to cheat. This is not a Kansas value. So we have to counter that. But they've been doing some phone banking, reaching out. And so if you are able to join those, I think that's a great way of talking to your friends and neighbors, because again, this is not a Kansas value. And we don't have any more information about how the demographics have changed, if there's more voters in the district. So you're really just going in blind, and it's really for those political purposes. But we will see. Our colleagues, several of them, have been invited to the White House this coming week to really kind of get the pressure on them, trying to agree to a special session. And all of the things that we know are used in Topeka when people are trying to get the votes, whether it's saying that you can't be a chair or a vice chair, or that you would be primaried. Those are the tactics that leadership are trying to use to get these votes. But if you will have, one-on-one conversations with several of the members, especially in the Johnson County delegation, they don't think this is the thing that should be done. We just need to make sure that they have the courage and the backing of their constituents to continue to tell leadership that this isn't right. And I think Joella did a good job of pointing, we see all of the things that have happened with really 2 votes for Donald Trump to get his agenda. So if you add 5 votes to that, it would devastate our country. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Most of my stuff is LCC, Legislative Coordinating Council. We are meeting tomorrow afternoon. I think it's at 2:00. And when the legislature is not in session, the group of leaders on both the House and the Senate side meet together, really for kind of just the everyday kind of things that we need to be done, whether it's approving interim committees, which I actually think our interim committees have been very busy in this off session and working on some things. I'm looking at Amanda, and sometimes we think we're moving forward and sometimes we're not, but with a more condensed and expedited session that leadership has decided we did last session, and again, we will repeat this session. I think those interims are even more important, making sure that we are thoroughly vetting ideas, making sure that Kansans have time to weigh in. Sometimes we do a better job than others, but I think if we are going to have this expedited, condensed legislative session of 90 days, that is really from start to finish with no rest, we really have to make sure that these interim committees are doing the job of really vetting and asking the hard questions of what are the unintended consequences of these issues that we bring forward. What else?
another thing that the special session could do is take away from some of these interim committees. I'm supposed to be meeting November 6th and 7th for the Russ Jennings Joint Correctional Juvenile Justice Committee. And so the petition, as we have heard, that the Republicans are signing to call a special session, it would be the date listed as November 7th. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to have 2 full days of that meeting or what the plan is there. But there are a number of other interims, like the special budget committee. I'm going to be on that one. And we're supposed to be doing a deep dive into the budget and putting together a legislative proposal for the budget. And we have not even started that. So I'm not sure. I think that this is really the looming special session, and all of this national pressure is taking off the focus away from the jobs that we're actually supposed to be doing as legislators. So I honestly have no idea the plan in place for the budget right now, but we need a really good understanding of the federal cuts and the programming that we've lost, and we just don't have that right now. So the other thing, the interims met for the state finance formula group to redo our state finance formula for our schools. And they've stopped meeting. I think they've run out of their meeting. So I don't know if that's on the budget or on the LCC agenda tomorrow or.
Yeah.
So it's really unfortunate that I think the Republican leadership is nervous about doing this, putting forth a formula for our school funding before the next election, because they know that their ideas were not popular regarding public education. And so we're going to kick the can down the road on something we're actually supposed to be working on, and work on something 7 years early regarding these maps. So it's just not in line with what our priorities should be, especially going into these midterms and election year. But I don't know, some of these interims with the special session going may have setbacks, and it's sometimes hard to find a time for these groups to meet. And we need to be focusing on the things that actually matter.
I will hit on. So the special budget committee, which the legislature took over writing the budget instead of starting from the governor's budget. And last year was the first year that we did this, and we started those meetings after Thanksgiving, was a rushed process trying to put our budget in place. So as we had talked about, Dan and Ty both wanted to do this again. And my request was, okay, if we are doing this, this is what we're doing. We need to start this process earlier. And they kept saying, we're going to start it by at least the end of September. Well, now we're mid-October and we still do not have dates for that special budget committee. They have said that instead of starting just in the House and then having the House, that we will be working on them simultaneously. But again, we should be having kind of those original conversations, having the agencies come before this special budget committee, so that we can have the deep dive, which was what the whole reason for the legislature taking this process over, was to be able to dive deeper and have a more thorough vetting of what the budget is, which has not been the case. For the LCC, so the special task force on school funding, because our school funding formula does expire on June 30th, 2027. Yes. Yeah, 2027. So the funding now will go into effect on July 1st of 2027. That funding formula, like we were supposed to have a recommendation to the legislature by the end of this December, so that we can start working on a budget, passing it, whether it's just extending the sunset or if there's going to be other larger adjustments to that. And again, I think people who do not want to fully fund our schools, they don't want their proposal out there because it will be a big issue on the elections in 2026. They have run out of their interim days, but I do think that LCC, last month, the LCC, one of the things that came before us was they wanted to spend it was $250,000, I think, was the amount on this data system that would do some processing and kind of give us some examples of funding formulas, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Like if someone can do this, but the subcommittee, which is Dan, Ty, and myself, met, and I said this could be a great program. I don't know, but this would be a sole source project that we are giving a contract to. And so we need to do an RFP and put this out to make sure, like they may be the only person, there could be others, but we haven't looked to see what's available, how it is. We haven't let others kind of bring that. So I think we will be probably discussing giving that task force another meeting so that they can establish kind of the parameters for what we're looking for a data system kind of like this. That would go out for an RFP. But then the legislative coordinating council would be the ones who would say, yes, we want to expend this money since the legislature is not in session. That's probably an overview, but what are your questions? And there's a microphone. Like I said, we're all like high tech today.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with health insurance. We're a non-Medicaid expansion state. I'd be interested if you think there's a pathway to getting there. But the second part of that is in light of that, with the Affordable Care Act tax credits expiring at the end of this year, there's a lot of concern about the cost of premiums going way up. And the people that will be impacted the most are people who deserve it the least. So I'm concerned about your comments on that and what hope do we have?
Well, I'm going to try to be optimistic. So I think the path for Medicaid expansion is an uphill battle. It has been. I think as we're seeing more of those effects in our rural hospitals and closures, maybe that's the path. But again, we're going to be in detrimental state before we even move forward. And if you talk to even our Johnson County hospitals around here, the amount of care that they give that's uncompensated, if we had expanded, they would have been drawing down money. Like I think if we were getting that, we would still be doing all of the programs. Because if you are in need and you go to a hospital, they're not going to ask you, let me see your insurance card before I give you a service. It's going to take an election change and new leaders in place that will support that. And the federal thing with losing those credits, I mean, I think Joella and I, we both try to have those hard conversations with our colleagues and talk about how this is affecting, people and their available to afford healthcare. But it's not just that. I mean, that is also, okay, do I pay my electric bill? Do I pay for groceries for my family? And so I think we try to have those conversations. This is not just a silo, and it's not people who are not worthy of healthcare, because I think every person is worthy of healthcare. But it's trying to find a way to have those conversations to where they see the bigger need for that.
That's part of our shipping, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is everyone familiar that the Affordable Care Act tax credits expire at the end of this year? And that's the big reason why Democrats didn't want to negotiate to keep the government open. That was the main thing that they were asking for through the budget negotiations. And even in the last couple of days, I have seen interviews with Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, and she is saying we need to renew these tax credits. And she is saying that this is on the congressional Republican leadership, the shutdown. And she even made a comment that the Trump administration is more focused on having all these wealthy people out to the Rose Garden Club, which I made the same comment at our fight back to her. So Marjorie Taylor Greene and I are now saying the same things. And I feel like that means things are maybe changing, and maybe we should be listening to the actual people, because this is very concerning. These credits are for hardworking people and those with jobs, and it helps small businesses that cannot afford to pay health care for their employees, so they can go into the marketplace and then get these credits. Their premiums are going to go up at most for some of these folks. It could double. And then some people are just going to immediately lose coverage. So not only is this bad for hardworking individuals, they're still going to need healthcare in crisis situations, and it puts an increased strain on our healthcare providers in emergency rooms, and it causes way more uncompensated care that they have to offer, and it impacts all of our access to healthcare. So I think it's frustrating that the government is shut down. It is really, really, really bad for the employees. Some are now being actually laid off. But I think the Democrats need to hold out on this because of the already big cuts that we have. They need to protect the Affordable Care Act. But on top of that, here in Kansas, our speaker has said he wants to cut $200 million from our budget next year and focus on Medicaid there. This would be a crisis situation for healthcare providers and those trying to access affordable healthcare. So that is a very big issue.
And the state will have more responsibility because of that. Hard decisions for the state.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's also, I mean, if you look, if there's fewer people insured, that's going to be on the people who have insurance through their employees, and those premiums are going to also go up. So even though I have access to healthcare through my husband's employer, like I am still going to be affected by this because of all of the other, I mean, it's a system.
It's even worse in a lot of ways as you get older because it's worse for people as you get older because the older people have chronic conditions, and so they lose their insurance. They're in much bigger trouble because it's not a matter of, well, can I get my annual checkup or can I take care of this emergency situation? It's I have ongoing medical costs every month that have to be covered.
And I am always like, I always talk about preventative care, and that's the cheapest way that we can do. So if you're having those regular checkups and things, which is what people are going to say, I don't need to go to the doctor for these regular checkups, and then you're going to wait till the catastrophic reason to go, which is going to be more.
On the tax credits, do you know where they fall, Democrat versus Republican? I would think that a lot of small businesses, farmers, those kinds of people would be as harmed as much or more than Democrats. I mean, I think it would be a Republican issue.
No, I think it should be. And that's what I think. If you actually dig down on these issues, it's not a Republican versus a Democratic issue. This is about how do we support our constituents and how do we deal with the kitchen table issues, which I think is why we are so frustrated when our colleagues are pushing for redistricting and these things. That is not affecting Kansans in their day-to-day life and making it more affordable. Like we should be looking at these other issues, digging in on the budget with all these federal cuts. How is this affecting us? And then with the speaker saying we're going to cut $200 million out of our budget. Like I am all for if there's fraud and let's try to be smart about these things. But I have yet to see that amount of fraud that we are dealing with.
I've wondered what it is that I think that the Johnson County has voted Democrats, but the rest of the state has not. But what are they saying? I mean, I don't understand being here. I think I need, on the one hand, what can I do? I'm living in a county that's already voting Democratic. And what are they saying that we could, or what are they saying and what could we do about it?
So I think those in charge do not like how Johnson County has been voting. And they tried in our last redistricting to change that by splitting Wyandotte County in two and then going to Franklin and Anderson County and putting those in CD3. Their version now is, well, we will split Johnson County in 2 or 3, trying to divide that vote. And if you actually go back and listen to testimony on when we did the maps before, our Senate president at the time was like, Johnson County is a, you know, so you have rules when you're doing redistricting that are kind of the overarching, these are things that you should abide by. And one of those is communities of interest need to stay together. And overwhelmingly, they said Johnson County is a community of interest and it should not be broken apart. But now what they're looking is trying to break that apart. I think the fact we can't make it a Democrat versus Republican thing. I think this is a fairness thing. And I think that's why we talk to someone and they may or may not care about Johnson County, or they may or like if they're in rural Kansas, or they may not see this. But I think it goes back to those in power should not be trying to yield more power in order to cheat the system. So I think that's kind of how we have to frame it to our friends in Western Kansas or in rural parts of the state, because it's not a Republican or Democrat. Like, do you want people in power skirting the rules so that they can win? And I think that's how we have to try to phrase that. I also think the voter to voter network and making sure that people are paying attention in voting. And so if you're not familiar with voter to voter network, you look at your circle of influence and you can see, okay, who's registered to vote, who has voted. I mean, we're going to be voting, early voting starts in a couple of weeks for our city elections. And you can say, oh, Amanda, she's one of my friends. She hasn't voted yet. So hey, Amanda, remember there's local elections coming up. Make sure you vote. It doesn't show you how they vote, but making sure. I do this to my kids all the time because they have to vote by absentee ballot. And I'm like, your vote has not been recorded yet. But I think those are ways to make sure that our friends that we're saying, you know, this is important. We want our Kansas values. And so in order to respect that and to make sure those in power are not trying to cheat the system, we want to make sure all qualified voters are voting.
Well, I think that's a good point, to be sure to vote in the municipal elections coming up in November. There are numerous excellent candidates and some that would be not so excellent. So be sure to engage in that, get out and vote. And that just gears us up for next year in the midterms, because Johnson County, Johnson County is voting Democrat. A lot of these precincts, the little neighborhood nodes, are voting together. But even in my seat in House District 17, I have Democrats, unaffiliated, and Republicans who vote for me. And I know a lot of my Republican voters really feel that the party does not represent them, but they would prefer to be a Republican. They would prefer to have a Republican who represents their views. So I really hope that our Republican colleagues in Johnson County can kind of take that moderation back. We really need that to help us get more moderate leadership in the House and Senate in Topeka, and as well as just up and down the ballot in our country, because the extreme views taken by the MAGA movement and President Trump, they just don't represent this area. But I don't think it necessarily means that there's more Democrats or this or that. Like, we have to just bring everyone in, because our county has been it's been very interesting. But I think that's also why we've been kind of on the naughty list because we surprised everyone so much with how we've been voting. But that's just this area. People want common sense, moderate, day-to-day boring government. I love that we're really digging in and looking at Meals on Wheels and how many people are being served. It's the day-to-day activities that people around here care about. And that's why it's so unfortunate to see the DC stuff trickling down here. Because it's not how people want to be governed.
Well, I think it's also important. I mean, we have regular town halls, and thank you all for coming. But a lot of people, they skirt away from that because they don't want to hear from their constituents. And I will tell you, I've been here when you all have been mad at a vote. I've been here when you've been happy with a vote. and that's part of representation. And that's like our job is to hear from you. And so I think we have to continue to encourage all elected officials to have those town halls, but we also have to make sure that when they do, we're not coming at them with the stakes and trying to throw them under the bus. Say, thank you for having that town hall. Like, yes, I'm mad at you, but thanks for showing up. And I think trying to build that stability again. And again, I think it's like that Meals on because we're paying attention. We know these are things that our community cares about. And I think aging gracefully in place is the best thing that we can do. And talk about something that's affordable for us. If we can have someone staying in their home with a couple of wraparound services, that is much cheaper than having to put them in assisted or long-term care, because we were able to do that Meals on Wheels. And the amount of money that we're spending on that is going to be a fraction of the price of the alternative.
Okay, I was reading in the Star, may have been a couple of weeks ago. Oh, I was reading in the Star a couple of weeks ago that Representative Mark Schreiber was opposed to it. I'm wondering, does he reach across? He seems to reach across the aisle
Yeah.
more often than maybe
He's
others.
great.
Now, how can I support him? Because he's definitely not my district. I wrote him a letter. I thanked him, you know, and we actually had a little correspondence because I sent him the wrong letter. I apologize.
Oh.
It wasn't a bad letter. It was just to a senator, you know.
Yeah.
But how can we support them? Because they're not in our district. But yet, I think it's important that they know that Kansans care.
I think if you sent him that probably meant a lot to him. Representative Schreiber is he works really hard for his constituents, and he is definitely willing to have conversations across the aisle. And the fact is, so he has publicly said he's opposed to the redistricting. So we'll need 5 total votes. So that's 4 we have so far on the record. And the fact is that when we stop redistricting, I'm going to look positively at this. It'll be with a vote to sustain the governor's veto. That'll happen later in November. Should we have a special session? That means that 5 Republicans did a very brave thing. I know the things that are being said over these phone calls. I know the soft threats that are being made. And so, in my opinion, those folks will need support like that, and they're about to do a very brave thing, and we've got to welcome them into the fold and thank them for being willing to do that, because if Kansas can show the country that it's okay to say no to Donald Trump, then maybe the domino effect of all these redistrictings will stop. Maybe that will just stop with Kansas, and they won't keep trying some of these other states, because they have not all the states were like Texas and just willing to go down this path. So I do think it is important to give those folks thanks, even if they're not your rep, because I'm sure they're going to get a lot of heat for that too.
Well, how about Senator Mike Thomas? He said he didn't sound as definite, but
Yeah.
when I wrote him the letter, he sounded definite that he was opposed to redistricting because we'd already done it. We don't need to do it again. Does he reach across the aisle as well, some, or maybe not?
Not so much, but again, I think to say thank you for this, continuing to stand up, like I think there is a way to do that. But I think some of these, like I would say he's more of an extreme, but there are times that even like the push is too much for them and they see that. And so I think it's always fine to say thank you. And like I say that to him. We do not agree on a lot of things. And I will say, normally he's had a teacher of the year in his district multiple times. And he always calls me to be the one who honors them on the floor, which I'm like, I am happy to honor them. I don't know why you're not honoring them. But so yes, like even those that maybe a broken clock is right twice a day. So you find those moments.
Because a lot of, oh, go ahead.
No, that's
Oh, a lot of it, the Republicans who are considering voting no on this, it's for varying different reasons. And for some, it's just very much rules related. And we're not supposed to be doing this until 2032. And others, they don't like gerrymandering. And we already sort of did that last time. So they feel like, hey, this, what we have now is what we meant to have and it's great. While others are just very worried about the backlash that could come of this. Right now, you have to make it about somewhat about Sharice David. She's the one sitting in that position that is going to be at risk of having a more difficult congressional district to run in. Sharice Davids is a very popular member of Congress. She is out there. She has represented the agriculture community tremendously. She has been a huge supporter of transportation. She's made very smart decisions and fought for this region, whether it was her original district or the one that she just ran in last time. And so I think that you don't want to underestimate Sharice Davids and her popularity and the support that she has from the voters in this area. And I'll go door to door, and even some of my Republican constituents who may not be voting for me, boy, do they love Sharice. She's everywhere. She does this and says this to me. I mean, she's definitely a popular person in this position. So I know that they know that if they draw her out, that is not the last that they will have seen of Sharice Davids in government.
Did you already say who the people against redistricting are on the Republican side, or who's on the fence that I'm like?
We didn't. Some were mentioning things that they've read in the newspaper. I think a lot of the pressure is going to be on our colleagues in Johnson County in Sharice's district. Those of us that share districts with her, I think a lot of them are on the fence. But then we do have just some very reasonable chairs and folks who like rules, like process, like Bob Dole and Ike type of Kansas politics. So I think there's it's a mixture of people who are very on the fence about this. And honestly, I'm going to say this honestly, I don't really think anybody in our legislature is overly excited about this.
And it's, I think that part, like I look back for the last 4 years when I was able to sustain vetoes and by pulling the votes on the Senate side, a lot of times it was more about the process than the policy. And I think we have to get back, like, we have to respect the institution that we're a part of, or it's going to fall. And so I think some of these individuals, like Joelle was saying, it's more about the rules. And like, we believe in rules and we believe in letting the process work. And when you put your thumb on the scale, a lot of legislators don't like that. And so those are some of the conversations that we have. I think a little insider piece that I haven't talked about. So you also have Republican candidates for governor, and you have factions within the elected body where they like one person over another. So I think that is also kind of a piece that we haven't talked about. So even if we have redistricting, there are going to be people who like one member that they are going to want to elevate their chosen candidate for governor over another. And they're going to actually be trying to sabotage who they think they can sabotage. So like
That can happen on both sides, though.
it absolutely can. But I think that's part of the thing where a lot of people, like, I don't think anyone is really excited about this, but I think we see some of those dynamics going to be in place too.
It's a long range look.
Do a second one, but I'll let everybody else go first.
I think you're good.
Oh, right there. John?
I came in late. I'm sorry, I had another meeting, but you may have discussed this, but I understand there's a number of candidates or potential candidates on the Republican side that are running for governor. Do you pick any of these as potentially the leader? And what is their position on this issue? redistricting?
Do I see them being the leader of the redistricting position? So I think our former governor and former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Collier was one of the first to, and I think this is trying to vie for an endorsement from Trump. And so he was really, I think, one of the first candidates on the Republican side asking for this. Senator Masterson, our Senate president, is one member who has the authority to push this issue and trying to get the legislator. So I actually think you have Collier in his camp and then Masterson in his camp vying for, they're both calling for redistricting, but Senator Masterson is the one who could possibly deliver. And this is about trying to get a Trump endorsement. Yeah. You go to my phone right there.
Okay. Well, it wasn't too long ago that we had ICE detained some people in a restaurant in Lenexa, and a member of the Lenexa City Council was challenged around her citizenship. This morning, I'm hearing from some people in our schools that while they're not seeing their families detained, there is a great deal of fear about that. You want to comment on that? And maybe we're not in as under the gun as much as some people, but it's still an issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that is an issue. And I was out of town when that happened, or I would have been at that hearing. I am actually thankful. I am a member of a faith community, and my pastor actually came. We have multiple congregations at our church. And I think the biggest thing that we can do as Kansans is talking about what immigrants bring to our economy. And we see there were some report last week that's talking about Kansas. They think we are in the start of a recession. Part of that is because of tariffs. Part of it is because of immigration and all of these. So our economy will break if we get rid of or we have the fear of those who are not originally from the United States. And so I think we have to have a conversation. Like, we are better together, and our diversity brings us better means. And I don't know how we actually go about this, but I think about some friends in KCK because they were also having a lot of these issues. And the community actually came together, went up to ICE members and said, "You're not wanted here. Our community is safe and inviting, and we are better because of our community and who is here." And so they kind of pushed that back. So I think we have to have kind of that step away from fear. And I'm not trying to say that the people who are afraid of being detained, whether it's because the color of their skin, because of something questioning, like, I understand that fear is there. But I think as white people in Kansas, we need to step up and say this is not acceptable in our communities. And I think we did see that in Lenexa when we were standing up for our councilwoman. And I've seen the restaurant is down the street from my house. And when the doors were opened, that parking lot is full. And I think these are ways of trying to assure members that they are members of society, and we appreciate those. And we have to counter the other message. I know Joella gets these emails that I do about banning driver's license for people who are immigrants. And I'm like, this is the stupidest thing that we could ever has, because we want people who are coming to our communities to be able to get jobs. What do you need if you want to have a job? Probably a driver's license, some kind of ID. But we want you to be able to drive legally to your place of employment. And so I think we as citizens have to change that narrative and talk about it. And that's on the floor. Like, I talk about, which I don't always like to talk about economic values, but sometimes that's the only lens that my colleagues see, and talk about the benefits of our meat packing plants in Kansas City, agriculture. Like these are things, without those things, our state would be devastated.
Thank you.
There is real fear in the immigrant communities across the whole entire country. And I think this is going to also build on what we were talking about, Donald Trump willing to cheat. The more fear he can drive, less people are going to feel safe going to the polls and vote. The more lists that his department can request, the more he can comb through and look who's on the voter rolls and look for their citizenship. So I'm really glad that Governor Kelly has held out on giving our SNAP, our food benefit information to the Trump administration, because that is not publicly available, and some of those are actually filled out confidentially, and they're asking for social security numbers and things that they really don't need in order to implement the program. So I think that all of these things are related, and it's why the fears are there and real. And going back onto, what can Democrats do? It's going to be very important to check our voter registration and make sure we're still registered, and make sure our friends and neighbors are still registered, because I just have to believe that they're doing things with these lists that who knows what. And I'm very concerned that some folks will be pulled from the rolls closer to the election. So we got to be vigilant and make sure that people have a safe voting plan and that they are registered and able to vote on our elections. But it is he's scaring people away from things, including from signing up for these benefits. They're going to be scared to report crimes, scared to come forward to law enforcement, and then things safety. It's harder for our local law enforcement to do their jobs.
I think it also goes back. I mean, Republicans in our legislature, they have always been, how do we cut taxes? Like, how do we not make life better for everyone, but how do we cut taxes? And I've talked to some colleagues in Kentucky. Also, I mean, they have a Democratic governor, but super majority Republicans in that. And I am astounded at some of the legislation that they get through. Like, if you get they've been working really hard on childcare, which is something that I talk about. But if you're getting some of those subsidies for childcare, they're like, hey, did you know that you also qualify for these SNAP benefits or all of these things, because they're trying to do the wraparound services. And like, these are Republican ideas in some states. Whereas in our state, we're like, no, we want to cut everyone off because we think they're not undeserving. So I think there's other things that we can learn from other states of, like, how do we make life better for our citizens instead of just kind of looking at this one issue.
Like Mexico and the universal child care.
Right.
Thank you.
I was just going to say something on voting. I'm a volunteer election worker, and we're going through training right now for the advanced voting and for the election. And one thing that the election office is very strong about emphasizing is our job as election workers is to serve the voter. So don't feel afraid to come in and vote. We're here to help you. We're here to try and make voting easier for you. We're here to try to get the vote counted and get everybody voting who deserves to vote. So
Thank you for that. That's such a great message.
And that's what I mean. I have never been a poll worker, but everyone who I know who has had, like, they have such a new appreciation for, like, it is a safe and secure process. And even if they had gone in skeptical of it, they're like, oh my goodness, like, no, I understand this. So I don't know, maybe we should require everyone to be a poll worker. It's like jury duty. And we're gonna
I want to go a little bit back to the immigration enforcement. And I may not know what I'm talking about, but it's my understanding that there's something called 287G collaboration, where local resources can be used, like the federal government is asking for local resources, local law enforcement to help them enforce federal immigration policy. I don't want that happening. I want my local resources to keep my local community safe. So is that happening in our county? That are local resources being pulled?
I don't think they are being pulled. And and I want to speak for Lenexa because there have been times that I've had friends who have felt that fear and they just saw police officers like parking in a parking lot that they were concerned about. So I actually called our chief of police and I said, hey, like, can you let me know what's going on? And she was like, we are not working with the federal, like, we're sorry, like this is something that they've always done, but we understand the fear and like they stopped what they were doing because it wasn't that they were looking for something, but it was perceived that way. And so based on that conversation, I do not think any of our locals are doing that.
So I'm trying to remember the deadline for people, like if they move to get their registration up to date. So especially on a local election when there's nothing that'll count if you're in the wrong place.
We're gonna phone a friend.
Yeah, well, I'm not working this year, so I've forgotten. I usually do.
Okay, here's the thing is if you moved within 30 days, you can do voting your old polling place through what's called an affidavit of former precinct resident. So you can say, yes, I lived here within the last 30 days. I just moved, but I'm coming back here to vote because this is where I used to vote and it's within 30 days. You do have to fill out a form to do it, but you can do it.
It's simple, but I'm trying to remember the last day to update your registration. Was it the 10th or the 13th or 15th?
I was thinking that 15th, but
That's what I was thinking too, but then I went, that's what I don't remember. Because one way to affect things might be that if you have a neighbor who's fairly new to say to them, have you done this? Get this updated now so you can vote for people that represent you and will in the future, especially if they've been in your neighbor for more than 30 days. So
One other thing is that you can vote provisionally at your new location, which involves filling out the voter registration update application.
okay.
yeah, but it doesn't. But as a worker, you can't say it won't count. However,
Yes.
Right.
so I'm just trying to suggest that one thing we can do as individuals, if we know somebody that's moved recently, is to help them make sure they get updated, realizing that there's no president or national person that you will be voting for because all your people will change if you moved any distance.
Yeah. So
So-
voter registration deadline for the November 4th election is Tuesday, October 14th.
Yeah. Okay. So it's this
So
week. If you have a
this
neighbor, you can
Tuesday.
go home tonight and say, "Are you up to date on where you are?" So.
If there's no one else. I've been reading Moran's newsletters to us. He seems to, in public, he's going along with Trump. But in private, he seems to be trying to help Kansas. What's your take on what he's doing?
I think I think Senator Moran is kind of in that position where I think he wants to do the right thing and support Kansas. And he has been very good to Kansas in ways. But he's also trying to thread that needle. So again, I think those are the times where you're saying thank you when he's doing those things. So back, and I can't even remember what that farm aid when all of those changes. So Senator Moran was very opposed to doing away with farm aid. So I did a resolution thanking him. I never went anywhere, but it was kind of the way of saying, I see you, I appreciate you. And so I think that's it. And I think the more that he hears from people, just say thank you, you're representing Kansans, like that's going to continue to help him. But I think he's in that hard situation.
And I think he's one of those who's not genuinely MAGA, but he has to go along with it, or has chosen to go along with it. You can kind of sense some of those folks out when you're having a conversation because their staff is so knowledgeable and says all the right things and knows all the right things, but then they end up doing the opposite. And I think he's probably one of those that wish he could have his old party back. But they're all kind of stuck right now because of how much power the president has garnered for himself.
Oh, that's okay. I wasn't gonna say anything, but what the hell. Despite all your optimistic comments, the Republicans still get reelected every time, but often unopposed.
Yeah.
So I can speak to the House Democrats right now because we formed our first ever campaign committee. I'm serving as the fundraising chair for that. We have a whole committee in place. The filing deadline is June 1st of next year, but we're getting our mail vendors in place. We're getting our digital folks. We are starting very early and getting ahead of the game and really upping the way that we do modern campaigning. So I think that's going to help a lot. We did our fight back tour, traveled the state. We're trying to recruit candidates in every single House district in the state, it's definitely a heavy lift. But and it's a hard time to convince people to run for office right now. Believe it or not, there are people are like, why would I do that? But that's another thing you can do. Encourage folks to run for office, and if you know somebody who does, if you have the means, give them a little bit of early money to help them get their campaign started, get their website built, start the basic things that they have to do. And if you can't afford to give money, donate some time because there's the people who are going to run in some of the tougher districts, that's a heavy lift for them to do, and it can feel very lonely and isolating to run for office. So the House Democrats, we're now very committed to putting together a plan and a program to help these folks feel like they're not on an island, and just start building there. Maybe we don't, whenever, we need to break the supermajority. We need 5 seats. Maybe we pick up some more, but we're building a long-term plan and a long-term bench to be able to have Democrats win outside of just our larger metropolitan areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long game, and I think we have probably historically not done a good job of reaching out. Like, we wrote off a lot of those areas, just saying those are ruby red. We're never going to. So I think the fight back tour that they've done, Kansas Democratic Party is going out. They were in Dodge City on, maybe it's today. It was yesterday or today.
They were there.
Having conversations, trying to listen to people and change that stereotype that some people have about Democrats, because I think we want to solve problems, and I think we need elected officials who are willing to solve problems and not play politics. But it is hard when, and I think it goes back to redistricting. We know our maps are drawn in ways, especially in Dodge City, they should have a Democrat representing them or a person of color because of the makeup of the district. But the way in which those lines are drawn, instead of doing a community of interest, that community of interest has been divided into 5 different little wedges so that their voice is diverted. So again, we always introduce bills saying we want a nonpartisan commission to draw our maps. But we also need people to show up and vote. And I try to remain optimistic, and I will say, I get frustrated and I do that. But I do think staying engaged and trying to do all of these things. And I mean, we're playing a long game, and you can't just get discouraged because, I had a crappy election for the Senate last year, and it is very discouraging. And I look at my colleagues in there. I'm a little more optimistic this year because I think there were new members where, whether or not they agree with me on policy, they may not like the process, and they see some of those. So I'm continuing to try to build those bridges to say, we can fight all day long on policy, but let's do it in a manner and engage the public so that we're not putting our thumb on the scale. And so I think that's kind of the conversation that we have to continue, but it is a long game.
Is there even a Democrat running for governor?
There's 2. I think there's 3. They have not officially gone on the ballot, but we have 2 actually in Johnson County who are running.
They ought to get their names out there. Everybody's talking about which Republican running for governor. Nobody says anything about a Democrat.
no, there are two Johnson County. They're both current senators who are running, and there is kind of a random person from Florence who I think is in the healthcare. So that,
I forgot about that.
but
I've been getting texts or emails from one of the candidates for a year. Seems like a year.
Yep. I'll say so you don't have to. The Democratic candidates are Ethan Corson and Cindy Holscher. So I have seen them both out and about. I'm getting things from both of them. So keep your eyes peeled. I know they've been both traveling the state. So it's good that there are people getting the Democratic platform and ideals out there. But it's good we do need to take that into consideration that maybe some of our platform issues are being kind of overshadowed by how big the Republican primary is. So I think that's something that the House and Senate Democrats can help with too, is that we're trying to get our platform issues out there, trying to get the messaging figured out. You can't really message for a campaign too far in advance because things change and who knows what's going to be going on. I don't know. Yikes, next year. We don't know. But frankly, I think that the national Democrats have a messaging and brand issue, and that we're all trying to figure that out. And here in Kansas, we're focusing on our state and local issues because I think that's all been kind of falling to the wayside with the fire hose that is the Trump administration.
One more.
all right, and then we'll get.
Oh,
No, you go, and then we'll.
I want to make sure other people get first question. Try to make this a positive statement. There was money being withheld from our schools. I know you care deeply from that, but I'm assuming that some Republicans stepped up at that point and said we can't do that. And that was around the first of the school year. Am I right? I understand that's one of the ways that the federal government punishes states is to withhold money, even if it's already been approved and budgeted. But in this case, the money that was being withheld ended up being given. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. And there we actually had, so this is like, there are 4 school districts that are being investigated because of KOBOC and so the federal, but actually because of the government shutdown, all of that has ceased to exist. So I kind of laugh about that. Yeah, all of those funds have actually been received.
Are there other places where funds are being withheld from Kansas right now?
Well, what did I just see? So, the reason this has been so hard for our research folks and budget folks to track this is because the funding is being withheld in different ways. Some came through congressional and budget action. Some are DOGE, the government efficiency cuts, and others were just grant opportunities. And then so all of a sudden you'll get a notice that one thing is cut, and then they'll put out a funding opportunity for a grant application in another area. So there have been some things like that. I'm drawing a blank on. Oh, I know what one of them was. World Cup funding. They did get notice because that was in the big ugly bill. That was like one thing we actually really did need. And those funding opportunities have just been posted within the last few weeks because the Kansas City Metro needs a significant amount of funding for public safety efforts during that. So it's completely chaotic, and you'll get notice in one area, but then there's this in another area it'll come out. So I think that from what I've heard from advocates in different areas, whether it be agriculture, education, the human services safety nets, the louder you are, the more likely you are to get that funding restored. So that is definitely a frustrating way to fund things. But because another one that Kansas did get was some emergency funding that we needed for, was it, I can't remember, it was the fires. There were a number of weather events, and we were able to draw down some funding for that, which had previously been withheld. So it's so random and hard to track. And then that doesn't even take into consideration the things that our local governments have lost and our state. Oh, I thought of what it was. Is I did a whole put an informational piece together on the things that the Trump administration has done regarding gun violence and the funding that the Biden administration had put out there for mental health funding in our schools and also violence intervention teams. Upwards of $100 million that's just gone. And he has really rolled back a lot of just common sense safety measures on top of the funding. So we were under the Biden administration holding bad actors and who are gun sales people accountable for 5 very specific and terrible things, such as failing to do background checks. So if you're selling guns, you're a federally licensed dealer, you immediately lose your license if that happens. There were 604 of those in the country, and the Trump administration has invited all 604 of them to reapply for their licenses. These are folks doing straw purchases, allowing teens and kids to access firearms and purchase them there, or they may have refused to cooperate with ATF or the FBI to run checks through their background check system to trace a firearm, and that's how they solve crimes. So there's some very dangerous policies that have that have been implemented since Trump took office that I think are just kind of falling through the cracks. We also started, the Biden administration had said there were 36 countries such as China, Venezuela, Jamaica, where we weren't going to allow them to sell firearms. But Donald Trump cares more about the gun industry profits than he does about our own national security. So those arms industries can sell to potential terroristic organizations and gangs.
Trump wants violence.
Yeah, and the Caribbean nations, they're over 60% of the guns used in crimes there are U.S. commercial sold guns. So we're trafficking guns to these areas that are extremely dangerous right now, and the U.S. completely has a role. We're responsible for it.
Okay, so I serve on the children's cabinet, and we get a lot of federal money for childcare and subsidies and things like that. And we do those in grants, block grants. And we have kind of planned accordingly. So we think, okay, this is what we're going to get, but we have kind of those, okay, if this, then this. So I think there's a lot of that in all of these organizations. So, okay, best case scenario. And that's what we actually did with World Cup. We were like, okay, best case scenario, this is what we'll get from the federal government. If we don't, then this. And so you just have a lot of contingency plans, which is kind of a logistic nightmare, but that's what we're doing most of the time.
Dinah and I in security vests.
Yes. It's true. Don't ever come to my door. I will not answer it.
Right in the window.
Yep, nope. My doorbell rings. I'm like, oh, they'll leave it. Or
All right, I think
one more. Okay, we'll do 2 more. We'll give you both.
So I'm out of date, I think. I thought I heard Joella say at some point recently that she's now the House Minority Leader.
No,
She's the whip.
the whip.
I lose my time.
She's the whip, but she doesn't. What's your job in the
Well, she's the one,
campaign?
you're the one that comes here regularly, and Brandon Woodard doesn't.
Yeah, he's the leader. Yeah.
So,
Brandon's the
I
leader.
just
She's the
thought,
whip.
where is he? Has something changed?
No, Joella whips everyone. So I want her in the Senate, except she lives in my district.
Yeah, I'm not running against you, Dinah. Sorry. Being in the Senate.
All right.
Okay, someone came up to me at church today, like I knew something and I don't. She wants to donate to the Democrat Party, but she's in her 80s and she's worried. Of course, I would be too. Am I donating actually? You talked about creating funding for the
Oh, yeah.
Democrats here. Is there a website that we can go to that we know this is where the funds are going?
So I would say there is the Kansas Senate House Democratic Party. What's your
Senate Health.
Kansas House? So we have a Kansas Senate Democrats and then a Kansas House Democrats, which I always say donate to those. And we will get those funds to the candidates that need it the most.
Okay.
KDP also, Kansas Democratic Party, but we can talk to you offline.
Yeah.
But like, so Joelle is part of the group on the House side, and then I'm on the Senate side. And I think donating to those groups, like we know those candidates and how best to kind of help them. I always say it's best to donate to a particular candidate, but then also to like these are the closest to those groups and able to do kind of some of the extra stuff that they need.
Kansas for Democratic House.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
The Kansas House Democrats, I can tell you where the funding is going right now. We're doing accountability for redistricting to stop that. And also we'll be building up big campaign plans to flip seats. And all that funding will go to getting the messaging out there through mail, through digital ads, and volunteer recruitment. So it'll go to break the supermajority in our legislature. And as Dinah said, giving directly to candidates, especially if they're a new candidate running in a hot seat in Johnson County, they're going to need some early money to get their campaigns up and running. I know the House Democrats, we send a lot of fundraising emails. You're going to get one from me on Tuesday.
And like you can donate online, but I know a lot of people are not always comfortable, especially if they're older. Like checks are still great too. Like
You'll still accept them then.
we still accept.
All right, guys. Thank you all for coming out.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you next month. Yeah, we'll know a lot more on the redistricting pass. So don't miss out. Bring a friend. There will be a lot to talk about in November, and don't forget to vote before that.